The Ducks are mathematically eliminated again, and they missed the playoffs for the sixth year in a row. We'll have therapy on this edition of Locked On Anaheim Ducks.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jason JD Hernandez. I've been covering hockey for well over a decade. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. I've hosted Locked On Ducks since 2019, and I've had to make the same tweet over and over and over again, and you all know exactly what that tweet is, and I'm never ready to make that now annual tweet. I mean, no one's ever ready to see your team just continually fail over and over again, but such is the extended futility of the Anaheim Ducks, because for the sixth year in a row, they are mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, which leaves a lot of questions, and it begs the question, where do the Ducks go from here? What happens to this team now? What needs to change? A lot of very fair questions. But before I get into even any of that, or maybe I'll save it for a mailbag, who knows? I just want to have some therapy here because I feel you all. I feel it. It sucks that this team with so much talent over and over again continues to, at this rate now, I would even go far as to say they're not so much underperforming, but there was higher expectations for this season. Now, a lot of that has to do with injuries, and there's been a ton of injuries for the Ducks this season. They've been one of the most injured teams this season. That's not an only excuse. I mean, there is plenty of, I guess, blame to go around, but there's a plethora of reasons why the Ducks continue to fail. So before I get into those reasons, I just want to look back a little bit because I feel like I say this every year. Every year I say the Ducks are out, the Ducks are out, the Ducks are out. Well, 2019, March 26th, the Ducks were mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. Yeah, that was back in 2019, March 26th. There was a fair amount of games to play, but, not 14. 2020, obviously, they weren't mathematically out. They lost their last game of the NHL season to the St. Louis Blues. That was 4 years ago, folks. In case you forgot, that was the game right before the pandemic shut everything down. The Ducks-Blues game was pretty much the final game before everything really closed down. And the Ducks weren't eliminated because we didn't know that the season would, go into the bubble. We didn't know that would happen. And then 2021, that was a season to forget. Yeah, that was a tough one, folks. That one was a really tough one. But I just remember going into that 2021 season thinking, yeah, they're in a tough division. There's no way they're going to compete in that playoff. But hey, it took all the way to April 28th, 2021. Granted, it was a shortened season. And the Ducks were officially eliminated on April 28th, 2021. And the hope then was that the Ducks would get the number one pick. That was the hope. 2022, I made this same tweet. 8 games left. The Ducks are now mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. I'm all for Team Tank, but at least win Getsy's final home game, please. At least they, gave Getzlaf a proper send-off. So there's that at least. That was April 10th, 2022. I made this tweet last year, March 19th, 2023. The Anaheim Ducks are officially mathematically eliminated from playoff contention. And March 17th, 2024, The Anaheim Ducks are now mathematically eliminated from the 2024 NHL playoffs. It is an annual thing now. This is a continual thing. I think part of what needs to change is some of the coaching staff. I give the benefit of the doubt to Greg Cronin because this is his first year with the Anaheim Ducks, and he is trying to instill a new system in this young Anaheim team. And there were some guys that adapted really quickly to that. There was some guys that really adapted to the Greg Cronin style of pressuring the puck. There was some guys that were more adaptive to closing in on the puck when it was stuck in the corner. Little things like that. So some guys were responsive, some guys were not. Some of the veterans had a tougher time really kind of gelling with this new system. One of those guys was Adam Henrique, who just never really got on with Cronin's system. Someone that did get on with Cronin's system, I thought, and he was subsequently traded, was Sam Carrick. I thought Sam Carrick had a terrific rejuvenation season with Anaheim. He was their main penalty killer. He was their best player on the PK. He was one of their better defensive forwards. Yeah, hard to believe, right? Like a forward playing defense, but he was quite adept at that. So the Ducks trade him away, and you see how the Ducks have done. They've lost 6 in a row. They're now mathematically out of it. In fact, I don't think the Ducks have won a game since the trade deadline, folks. The deadline was a while ago, and the Ducks haven't won since then. So maybe losing a couple of guys like that really hurt them. And looking at the calendar, just because I'm looking at the calendar right now, their last win was against the New Jersey Devils. The Ottawa Senators on March 6th, not the Devils. March 6th. That was the last time the Ducks won, and that was right when they traded Adam Henrique and Sam Carrick. It was like right then. Yeah. Losing those guys sucks, and I still can't believe the Ducks even won that game against Ottawa, but, still got to give credit where credit was due in that game, and I think all the credit on that one went to Lukas Dostal, who Locked On Sens called a star. That was the last win for the Ducks. Since the trade, 6 losses in a row. They lost to Dallas badly. They got curb stomped by the Islanders. Got curb stomped even worse by the Blackhawks. Got shut out by the Wild. Shut out by the Winnipeg Jets. And lost this one to the St. Louis Blues. So losing some guys stings. The rookies, or the young guys. I noticed that Mintyukov is really handling this new system well under Greg Cronin. So he's looked good. Zellweger, I thought, has been more aggressive as we've gone on, but not aggressive in a bad way. McTavish has been aggressive, but has also taken a lot of penalties this season. So there is still a bit of aggression, but still they kind of have to hold back on penalties a little bit. And I think harnessing that energy is going to be key. What they do need to do is, I think you know where I'm going with this, and I know at least a couple of Ducks fans have asked me about this or have complained to me about this. Time to get rid of the assistant coaches. I've gotten my fair share of complaints about Newell Brown this season. Last season, yes, but I've gotten a lot of complaints about Newell Brown this season, saying that the Ducks need to get rid of him. Special teams have been abysmal this season, and it has been. Power play has been atrocious at times. The penalty kill, especially lately. I mean, what are the Ducks doing on the penalty kill lately? It's been awful. And I know some of that falls on Greg Cronin, but a lot of that falls on the assistant coaches as well. So I think there does need to be a change there. It's got to be time to make maybe a complete overhaul on the assistants. Who knows? Yeah. All right, we're going to head into the first intermission. Talk about that Blues loss. Stay locked in. Now a brief word from Sleeper. That's right. It is March. We're almost at the end of the season. But regardless of where the Ducks are in the standings, there's no better place to play daily fantasy hockey than Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. You can also play fantasy MLB, among other things. Just as far as NHL is concerned, you could pick guys like McDavid or McKinnon or Ovechkin, who's starting to get hot again. Whether they'll record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, plus, minus, etc. To win a 100 times bet, correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Ducks fans. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. That's $100. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you are locked in with Jason JD Hernandez. Let's talk briefly about that game against St. Louis, because it was certainly one to forget for the last period. The first 2 periods I thought were okay. The Ducks actually kind of played their game a little bit. They passed the puck around fairly well at the start. Yeah, they looked good to start. I thought they had a good chance to win that game. And then the Ducks do what the Ducks do, and that's not stay out of the box. The first period I thought was a disaster in that regard, because the Ducks just gave the Blues chance after chance after chance. Like, they gave them every chance. Like, Zellweger had that slash. Frankie had that slash. The Vakanainen high stick was just a bad one. That one, you cannot raise your stick like that. So 3 power plays for St. Louis, and they looked bad in all 3 of them. The Ducks did an okay job on clogging the lane a little bit, and they were starting to crash the puck and actually play a little bit aggressive on the PK. Like, wow, this looks pretty good. Can the Ducks keep this up? No, they couldn't. First period, Troy Terry did get a nice pass from Pavel Mintyukov to make it 1-0 Ducks. Yes, I fooled myself, folks. I did think the Ducks had a chance at this one. Once they had a 1-0 lead after the first, I was like, okay, they look good. Then they started to look even better in the first. There was a 2-on-1 for Brett Leeson. He couldn't quite get it, but Brett Leeson needs more playing time. And I'm glad that he's starting to get more playing time for the Ducks. But I would say more. Okay, so we give him 12 minutes? More. Okay, how about 14 minutes? More. I want to see Leeson get like maybe 16, 17 minutes on ice. I mean, Killorn was Killorn on this one. Troy Terry killing it. Troy Terry also should be getting more minutes. I'm just saying. Terry should get more minutes. Leeson should get more minutes. Silverberg got a lot of minutes in this one. Vetrano got a lot of minutes on this one. But that's Frankie. He's been good. Leo's starting to get a lot more playing time lately, and I like seeing that. What I did like in that first period was the connection between Troy Terry and Leo Carlsson. They generated some pretty solid chances on this game, and Troy Terry getting that first goal, I thought looked really good for the Ducks. And I thought Leo Carlsson and Troy Terry, they were a very good tandem to start the season. I know I mentioned this, if you're an everydayer, I've mentioned this before, that Troy Terry became a little bit unselfish the first maybe 20 games of the season, and he deferred some of that offense to Leo Carlsson to get his confidence up, which worked like a charm. And then you saw the connection of Leo and Troy get even better as they had more time together. Then Leo got hurt. And then we haven't really seen those two together in a while. But to have them together in the first half of the game, that gave me a little bit of hope. And then inexplicably, for some reason, Greg Cronin split them up. Why? Why would you split them up? I know in the last segment I just mentioned that you got to put a lot of the blame on the assistants. In this case, this is where I put the blame on Greg Cronin or whoever told him to separate Troy Terry and Leo Carlson. They were fine. They looked good. They were the best chance to generate some offense. And I get if Leo and Troy are working, you want to put Leo on a different line to try to, I don't know, give some kind of spark to a different line. That doesn't always work. Sometimes one strong line can make all the difference in a game. Because all of a sudden, Troy Terry was getting stopped a little bit. All of a sudden, Troy Terry was getting double teamed and he was having a hard time getting the puck into the zone. All of a sudden. Same with Leo Carlson. Leo Carlson all of a sudden looked okay, looked pretty good generating some type of offense. I did like seeing them on the power play, but, keep them together at all times. Don't separate them. And what do you think happened there? Yeah, the Ducks had a couple of power plays in the second period and couldn't really do anything in either of those power plays. In fact, both power plays looked bad. They just looked bad in that second period. So, yeah, it was 1-0 for a while. Then St. Louis scored to tie it up at 1 goal apiece. Oh, yeah, that was a bad one. But I will give credit to all the young guys. Leo looked good when he was with Troy Terry. Mintyukov looked good. Zellweger looked really good, folks. Zellweger was generating some pretty solid offense on this game. So I got to give props to Zells for playing up a little bit and just getting pucks towards the net from the point. I know he's playing from the point. He's a defenseman, folks. He's sometimes still going to move up a little bit and move up towards the red line and switch with whichever forward is playing that wing position. And they'll switch. And Zells looks good when he does that. But there could have been more of that. There really could have been more of that. And there just wasn't. Also, the defense, they left Lukáš Dostal out to dry. They did. I mean, they were headshotting him. We were tied after 2 periods, 1-1. And then all things just completely turned south. It was at this point that I began listening to Ducks stream because I feel like I get a lot more from listening to Steve Carroll and Emerson Edom than I would on TV with, those two. Yeah. I've talked about Hazy several times in the past. I'm not going to talk about that now. I'll save that for later. But the way that Emerson put it, St. Louis was just generating every chance, and they were playing like they were a team that was going to take advantage of every mistake the Ducks were making. And that's exactly what happened. Leo Carlson got a penalty. Then Jackson Lacombe got a penalty. A bad penalty at that. In the words, I don't know if it was Steve or Emerson that said this, but they called it out. They said, that's a penalty you cannot take at that time. So they were a little bit critical of the Ducks and their penalties in that third, especially the holdings. I think it was Lacombe and Jones that got them. And on all 3 power plays, all 3 of them, St. Louis scored. Thomas scored twice. Neighbors scored once on the power play. Every time there was a power play for St. Louis, they scored. After the first one I was like, okay, that was just like a great play. The second one, that was just kind of like not sloppy, but, sloppy-ish for Anaheim. When I watched and heard the Ducks go on the power play or on the penalty kill the third time, I said, they're going to get scored on again. And they did. They absolutely did. And that was the game. Oh yeah, Troy Terry did score with a few seconds left. He didn't even celebrate. Troy Terry just scored from a weird angle with about 7.5 seconds left. Nobody celebrated. He just kind of nodded his head like, okay, went back to the bench. And a few seconds later, buzzer sounded. Ducks lost 4-2. Mathematically eliminated from the playoffs for the 6th year in a row. Just sad, folks. Just sad. All right, I'm just going to talk for a couple more minutes after the second intermission. We'll get to final thoughts on the other side. Now a brief word from Robinhood. Yeah. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. The offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Investing involves risk including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA is available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks. Once again, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And once again, Locked On with JD Hernandez on this annual podcast that I do every year when the Ducks are out. And this is the 6th year in a row, 5th full season covering the Ducks. This is always the hardest one. And I thought about how I was going to approach this podcast, if I was going to just go full Steve Dangle mode, if I was going to yell into the ether, if I was going to try to implore the coaching staff to let the kids play. And then I just decided I don't have the energy for that. I mean, after so many years, it gets tiring watching this Ducks team just continually lose every year. How bad did it get? Well, I've been messaging back and forth with a slew of people. And I know I mentioned that the shoes were on sale and I was going to buy some. And I jokingly said, like, you know what? If the Ducks get a win this week, I'll buy a pair. If the Ducks get 2 wins this week, I'll get 2 pairs. If they win all 3 of their games this week, then you know what? Screw it, I'll get all 3 pairs. Yeah, they did not win a single game this past week. Not one. Actually, there were 4 games this week. 4 chances. They lost to St. Louis. Lost to Winnipeg, Minnesota, and Chicago. And I texted and messaged saying, you know what? I know I kind of made that joke a little bit, but the fact that they are already mathematically eliminated, and this is the earliest date, by the way, the earliest date in the calendar year that the Ducks have been mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. And that includes some of the dog years. That includes some of the early years. March 17th. I mean, we couldn't even get March 19th to tie last season. And last season was historically bad because they wound up with the worst record in the National Hockey League. This is worse than that. How is this worse than that? Because the expectations were higher than this. The Ducks were expected to take a pretty solid step forward. I was actually kind of hoping that the Ducks, my expectation wasn't playoffs, but I expected them to do better. My hope was that they would at least stay in the race into April and make things interesting. That was the hope. And they just couldn't do it. They couldn't. It makes me sad. And then I finally ended Sunday evening, and I was kind of on the verge of buying the shoes. Like, it was in my cart. And then my friend said, like, I get it. Like, I wouldn't want to buy them right now either. And in fact, he didn't get his shoes. And you know what? Do any fans really want to spend their money on this team right now? Do they want to spend money on a team that has missed the playoffs 6 years in a row? I mean, that's see, that makes me feel terrible saying it like that. But, do you want to see the rest of this season? Do you really? I think the only reason I want to see the end of this season is I always want to see the young kids. And I love watching them play. I love watching Menchikov play. I really love watching Zellweger play. I especially love Leo Carlsson with Troy Terry. I could watch those two in tandem every game. And I wish they would stick together every game. And for a team with those kind of expectations, I was hoping for better. I really was. I don't even know what more to say on this one, so I think we're just going to end it here. Next podcast is going to be recorded after the Ducks Wild game. We're probably going to have Seth Topol back from Locked On Wild. It's always a fun time. And I'll just finish with a closing thought. Those of you watching on video may have noticed a little something different with the jersey. Look, they're mathematically out of it. I can't show the Ducks logo on the day they're mathematically out of it for the 6th year in a row. I just can't. The Ducks haven't even won a playoff series since 2017. So it's been 7 years, folks. 7 long years. This is the equivalent of, hanging your flag upside down. That's what this feels like. All right, now I'm done. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Don't forget, this podcast is free and available across all platforms. You could follow me on Twitter at SimplyJD. Show's Twitter at LO_Ducks. One final piece of therapy. It'll be okay. Next year, it'll be okay. I'm going to be the eternal optimist and say the Ducks will be back next season, at least competing. And 2 years from now, we should see them in the playoffs. I know I said this 3 years ago. I said this 2 years ago. And part of me is kidding myself for that. But this time, I truly think they're going to come back strong very soon. That's my final thought. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason J.D. Hernandez saying have a great rest of the day. Remember to be safe out there. Please be kind to one another. Please go hug a Ducks fan. And Ducks fly together.